What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. A reminder, if you want to see this podcast, you want to fire it up on your smart TV or just your computer, you can do so on YouTube, youtube.com/pick6. Go there. If you listen to this podcast regularly, even if you don't want to watch it, do your boy a favor, go there and subscribe on YouTube. If we get the numbers up, the Pick Six group will get a pizza party. So we're competing with David Sampson and his little minions. That delightful laugh you hear is the one, the only Jonathan Jones joining us to talk what might happen with the NFL. JJ, what's up, buddy?
Man, I'm living. I just got done took all my vacation at one time. That's what I've always done. Because once the season starts, it's on. This is really like an 11 and a half month a year NFL. So I just take it in one chunk. I'm nice. I'm refreshed. I'm recharged. I'm ready to go for the next 49 to 50 weeks. Let's go.
What did you do for vacation?
So girlfriend and I had planned to travel to New Orleans. Ooh. And from New Orleans to Arizona. And from there to LA. Yeah.
Followed by California and then South Carolina.
So we just went ahead and canceled all of that. And we just wound up kind of doing a staycation, going out to the lake, going up to the mountains. So it was good. It was chill, but I'm happy to be back. I need to contribute to society, to the sports conversation. And what better place to do it than right here with you, Will?
Well, there's probably better places, but sure, we'll take it. And yeah, JJ's in Charlotte. It is very convenient. The beach is not convenient for Charlotte, but the lake, Lake Norman, very close. My father-in-law has a place there, actually. So my wife was down there a couple weeks ago. And the mountains are actually surprisingly close to Charlotte. People don't know that. You can hop up to Asheville and Boone pretty quickly. So I'm jealous of that. Anyway, let's talk about what went down over the weekend. So I think there's a lot of confusion about exactly what the NFL players wanted. They seem to make it clear, although there's been some speculation it's financial versus actual health and safety issues they have. We saw superstars, Russell Wilson, J.J. Watt, a litany of guys from around the league.
Biggest of the big, yeah.
Yeah, this was not – the one – it was almost notable with his absence was Tom Brady not tweeting anything. They all had hashtag we want to play. I like let us play better, but that's semantics. What do you think was behind this primarily? Was it health and safety? Was it financials? What do you hear?
I think that these guys absolutely 100% want to play football. I am not anticipating very many guys triggering their opt-out clause whenever that is figured out. And that's according to sources around the league. That's according to me going to locker rooms for the last decade and starting to know these guys. And I would say too, the composition of the league as a whole. Yeah, somebody's going to take your job if you miss one rep at practice, much less you set out of the season for legitimate and understandable concerns. But if you're worried, if you're playing through the pain just because you don't want the backup left guard to take your job, you're probably not going to sit out this season unless those safety and health concerns are very real.
Finite earning window here that people need to understand for these NFL players. Whereas an NBA player, Josh Smith. Remember Josh Smith? He got a $72 million contract from the Clippers or the Hawks or something. You can get paid as a basketball player, fully guaranteed over a lengthy stretch. You can sit out a season and survive it. For some of these guys, it is almost impossible to miss a season.
Yeah, especially when the average contract is 3.5 years, especially when these guys are coming out of college and they're going to be obviously cheaper to replace you, et cetera, et cetera. So it was unclear what these guys wanted. It was similar to during the CBA negotiations where a bunch of guys came out and said, say no. Okay, well, no to what? What are your reasons? Is it just no? And of course, obviously the vote was yes or no, but let's hear some reasons. I'm not entirely sure that this blitzkrieg of tweets from players motivated the NFL owners, the NFL and the NFLPA to agree to the terms that they got last night. I think that they were already in the red zone on a number of things. I don't want to say they were at the 1 yard line, but they were knocking on the door. And unless Steve Sarkisian's the offensive coordinator, they're getting into the end zone. And
Yeah,
so,
metaphors and Steve Sarkisian drive-bys. I like it. Like obvious
boom.
metaphors followed by Steve Sarkisian just assassinations. I like it.
And so, but yeah, listen, I saw it too, Will, on Sunday. It was my last day of vacation, so I wasn't going to hop into the fray on Twitter. But everyone wanted to dunk on the NFL. You've had all this time to figure out everything and all this stuff, and now look at you. They were like 93% of the way there at that point. Now, the players aren't wrong. They want to know exactly what the deal is, when they're going to get tested, what their options are in terms of an opt-out clause. Are they going to be able to protect their families as well as reasonably possible? Because that's the other point, is that, Russell Wilson, fully understand and appreciate what you're saying about your pregnant wife and wanting to keep her safe. But this will never be a 0% risk. Like that's not going to be the case until we have a vaccine for this virus. It will never be a 0% risk. And so what you do have to understand is what that risk is, which the players have every right to. And I think that's what we're working toward. And then finally, we're not in the 11th hour. Will, like, we're still 7 weeks away from Texans Chiefs. Even at the longest ramp up acclimation period window that there is, we're still well within it. And really, we could stretch this out another week and guys could still be healthy enough to play football. So all of those things considered, this isn't the MLB. This isn't, the NBA back and forth. Right now, everything's okay, but go out there and get your Twitter retweets and likes.
Well, no, that's a fair point. And to know, I mean, like the NBA was in the middle of a season when this happened. They have to find out a way to wrap up the season and do it in an expedient enough fashion that they have an off season where they can actually do player movement. And these guys don't have to, I mean, it's hard to play 50 games, take a break for 3 months in a pandemic, come back and play 20 games, then play more games for the playoffs, then take a shorter break, then come back and play another full season. Like you talk about like the wear and tear. This is why, I mean, it just wears on you. You can't, nobody can, only LeBron James can do it for so many years. Even your guy, Michael Jordan, needed an NBA imposed gambling suspension in order to
crazy.
I'm just kidding. By the way, I don't know if you saw this, The Last Dance, I noticed this last night, is on Netflix now.
Yeah, they had said that early on
huge.
Because yeah, it's great. I mean, I saw it once and I'll be good. Maybe I'll check it out again next year, but I'm good for now.
No, I started watching the first episode. I was like, I don't need to see it right now, but it's nice. There are a lot of people who didn't see it because they had, like they canceled cable and it wasn't on ESPN Plus or whatever. So
right.
I'm letting them know if you want to go watch it, it's on Netflix. It's very entertaining. It's not a documentary. It's
nope.
It's just Michael Jordan dunking on people for 8 to 12
and like fabricating plenty of things.
Sure, of course. That's what Michael Jordan's career isn't fabrication, but there is before social media showed up, you had this aura of guy, like now the aura no longer exists. We see the basic nitty gritty of guys. Anyway, how do we get there? That's my fault. I mentioned Netflix. So what do we have from the perspective of things that were implemented? Daily testing, right? And then there's going to be, what is it? If you test, all right. So what's the entry look like?
So you get a test and hopefully that's negative. 2 days later, you go back, you get another test. Hopefully that's negative again. And now you get to be at the team facilities on day 5 or 6. And now after that, that's where you start strength and conditioning. And then after a certain period of strength and conditioning days, that's where you go to non-padded practices. And after that certain period, you're going to go to padded practices. And we know that there are 0 preseason games. And so hopefully you have done, you are conditioned well enough to where you're not going to go out there and pull or tear your hamstring in the first quarter of week 1. So soft tissue injuries were really a concern for all this. And then number 2, you're not going to tackle like, I don't know if you can cuss on here or not, but you're not going to tackle terribly because
Debo just has to bleep it out later. So if you want to cuss away and we'll bleep it.
Okay, I'll consider it for the next time, but I want to sound cool when I do it.
Debo says JJ can cuss, but not Pete.
Okay, fair. Well, that's how it should be. And what was I don't know what I was going to say. Oh, and so padded practices, everybody's going to be able to take good angles and tackle well. And so hopefully you get a decent enough product in week 1.
I don't think that'll happen, but that's fine. So also on the We can get into that in a second. Also, I mean, the league is going to spend $75 million on testing and no preseason games, as we pointed out. I like your point about the red zone thing. This stuff is pretty basic and obvious. Like, this was going to happen. People that are like up in arms. The preseason was never happening. There are no fans don't like the preseason games. Players don't get paid for the preseason games. They're not going to travel and intermingle different teams in different states with different laws about who might or might not be in the stadium and risk that exposure when you can take training camp and do an extended training camp and create a bubble for your team. Like, that's what you have to do. The idea.
And so the point is to protect week one, right, Will? It's
exactly.
all about it. It doesn't matter necessarily. I was texting with a coach about this today. I was like, hey, given the circumstances, are you okay with no preseason games? He goes, well, I don't have any choice. So yeah. And the point is, yes, the preseason does bring in money for NFL owners. And obviously with the revenue sharing deal, about half of that is going to the players. So they're going to have to figure that out on the back end, what the salary cap is going to look like and all those things. However, the biggest hit to the salary cap is not whether or not fans are in the stands, which we know some places there won't be, some places there will be a few. The biggest hit would be if a regular season game is canceled. That's what cannot happen. You can't start paying back money to your broadcast partners when you don't deliver a game. You can't, that's.
The Texans don't play in week one. That right there is a couple $1 million, bare minimum, like probably 10
Oh, no. It's tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah, tens of millions of dollars if you lose that game. And we saw this in March Madness. You know, it's weird how it works. And I don't know if you know you know what, I'm not going to get into the specifics of it, but the point being is that there's a lot of money involved and everybody needs those things to happen. And if the NFL is forced to pay back $15 million or $50 million, let's say, to NBC for the first game of the season, because NBC loses all its advertising because there's a Corona outbreak and Patrick Mahomes can't play, that is a devastating nightmare to the salary cap.
And if you cannot deliver that because you guys wanted to have your week 3 preseason games to make sure blah, 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 that you ended up getting that everyone didn't have to pay back the local broadcast TV rights or
Didn't
whatever.
You look like an idiot.
So that's ultimately the point. But here's the other thing, Will, and I've said this on a couple of radio hits since I got back, that I want to it's so easy to dunk on the NFL. And what drove me crazy over while I was on vacation was when the chief medical doctor of the NFL, Alan Sills, inform the players that they cannot trade jerseys after the game, that's going to be prohibited. And I know a lot of people say, oh my gosh, that's so stupid. What do you call football? Okay, first of all, football and physical distancing are incompatible. Number one, we all understand that. But just like they're instituting rules in the break room about who can touch coffee pots, the same principles apply to that as are being applied to preseason, where we are going to eliminate every unnecessary risk of exposure as much as possible. And so if that means that if Richard Sherman and Marcus Peters on 2 opposing teams that may not share the field, that otherwise would have no reason to come in contact with each other, if these 2 guys, the only time they come in contact and one of them happens to be positive for COVID-19 is in a jersey exchange, or one of their jerseys happens to have COVID on it and you take it back, all of those things, then you have now had unnecessary exposure also that you could go frame your buddy's jersey. That's the point.
Order one off Fanatics. Have him mail you one later. There are other ways to get the jersey. You don't need to do the jersey swap. It is a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer.
Don't shake hands. Don't meet in the middle. Everybody goes their separate ways. You're trying to minimize contact. Now, you're right. Can you do it in the game? Of course not. These guys are battling. Like golf, they can do it. Baseball, they can do a pretty good job.
For the most part, yeah.
Basketball, a little bit tougher. Football, most certainly the toughest. It's the hardest one. Now, I have a question. I was sort of wondering about this. How is this going to look in the regular season? Like, and this doesn't really apply to week 1 in the first game of the season, but like, let's say it's week 5 and the Steelers go down to Miami to play. I have no idea if they're playing, but hypothetically, they go down to Miami. If you're like a 22-year-old newly minted millionaire, I'm not really naming anybody specific. I'm just trying to come up with a hypothetical example. are you staying in the bubble before the game? I mean, or are you maybe going out? You know what I mean? Like
there are temptations there. And so the thing is, it's just like how we're all telling people wear a mask, and the mask doesn't necessarily protect me, it protects you from me, right? And so it's the exact same principle on, hey, I know you want to live it up in South Beach and you want to do this, and this is an all new, brand new feeling for you. I don't care. Like, stay your ass in the hotel room. That's the only thing that matters right now, because the only way that we get from week 1 Steelers in Miami to week 2 home game to week 3 and all that stuff is if you stay in the hotel, you don't have a roommate, you keep a seat between everybody on the plane, you don't take an Uber, you have contactless delivery to the hotel, you don't hop into the hotel whirlpool, all of those things. And we are all, what's the phrase? We're all
societal contract.
That's right.
You have a society, you have a contract together, an unspoken contract together that we're all going to do the right thing. Now, and people big mad on Twitter that we talk about too much Corona on this, but you need to understand this is what is impacting. We are trying to lay out what will happen with the season. And I'm not going to go on a rant about how now all of a sudden everybody might be okay with wearing masks because one particular thing changed. I'm not going to do that. You know, that would be insane to suggest that anybody would wait until late July to alert the entire world that they should wear a mask when you had the opportunity to do it for several months. I'm not going to go on that rant.
You're not going to do that. Okay.
I'm not going to do that, JJ. But like, yeah, what's interesting is that I think from a football perspective, so people are like, the Patriots are done. Well, you know what? You know who I trust more than, like, if I'm trusting a team to keep their bleat together and to listen to what the coach says and not have people going rogue, younger guys on the team going rogue, it's the Patriots, right?
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that factor makes a difference? And I think, was it Bruce Arians or somebody said something like, listen, this is going to be like, if you don't want to show up and be a part of the team, that don't, or maybe it was Mike Tomlin, I can't remember, but somebody said that. They're like, look, this season more than ever is going to be about, are you willing to sacrifice certain things for your team? And maybe there's not a whole lot you can do to guarantee it, but minimizing risk is going to be a big factor for whole teams getting sick.
Okay, so obviously no one's in a bubble here with the NFL. And so what comes to my mind is, I don't have the stats offhand, but, you know, listeners who are in these cities or in these states can understand. You can't be the teams that are going to be best prepared, I believe. Okay, you got the Patriots and their doctrines and whatnot. But if you are a team that's in a state that does not have relatively a lot of cases, that's number one. Number two, if your team facilities are located close to where a majority, if not almost all of the players are. So the Atlanta Falcons, for example, I don't know what the numbers are in Georgia, and I don't necessarily care, but a lot of those guys, especially the non-veterans, live in Atlanta where they practice in Flowery Branch, 50 minutes north of Atlanta. And so, like, all right, well, now you're in this city, but now you're coming up here and you know, the transportation, all that. And so as much of a bubble-like atmosphere as can be created with 90 people, 90 men plus coaches and staff who are all out in the real world, as much of a bubble as can be created, those are the teams that are going to be mostly successful.
Right. And there is only so much you can do. The NBA has been wildly successful so far at getting, you know, they got the players in the bubble, but I don't think, can you bring your families to the bubble? I wasn't really sure.
I think you can.
To be honest, I'm sort of checked out on sport. Like
you're checked out on sports.
I mean, sort of I found this, and I don't know if I mentioned this in the podcast yesterday. I could have. But like, this is usually a pretty, like, I mean, we're ramping back up for training camp, but this is usually the stretch, the month where it's like there's nothing going on.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, you know, or like there's other sports going on, but I guess my point is, like, I'm hesitant to buy in and be all the way in.
Do you not want to get burned again, because are you afraid that sports are going to come back and then they're just going to be ripped from you?
I don't want my heart broken, JJ. That's where I'm at. That's right.
Is it better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all?
Yeah, I think it's better to have never loved at all than you don't know heartbreak. No, I'm just kidding. All right, anyway. So let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll discuss more things related to the start of the NFL season. All right. So when we talked to you last time, which feels like 7 years ago, maybe like
probably
a month ago, you had done the 3-part series for .com on the season and what it would look like without fans, I think that held up well.
Yeah. Fortunately
I mean,
enough.
if I recall, I don't even know if I felt this when I read it, but I don't know what kind of feedback you got or exactly when you wrote it. Do you remember if it was like May or June?
I think I worked on it throughout all of April, and I think we published it the 1st of May. You thought I was being alarmist, didn't you? You thought that there was no way.
No, not me. I'm saying,
okay.
But I mean, like, I wasn't even skeptical. I think I was at least a little skeptical at the idea of no fans, but I would bet that you got a bunch of pushback from people who are like, you've lost your mind, bro.
Yeah. It was funny because I started trusting a little bit more my gut and like what the smarter folks on television who knew what was going on were saying. And that was, I remember in March when this stuff started really, around the time that Tom Hanks and Rudy Gobert contracted, because that was the night that everything changed, at least in our country, right? And certainly in our American sports world. And I remember calling around to different teams and scouts and like, hey, I don't mean to be alarmist, but are you guys going to still be on the road? And it was like 4 hours later that a report came out that the Eagles had pulled their scouts off the road. And remember, the Eagles also said, well, we're not doing it because of Corona. And it's like, we're doing it because of, it's like, you guys, you're not losing any machismo by saying, like, you can say it's because of this virus. But because of that, and I saw the way this was trending, and I see that, hey, we're not going to have a vaccine, and hey, it's still going to be contagious, and hey, it's still not going to be safe to hang out beside each other in seats, that, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm aware of that. Thank you. You don't need to let me know, podcast listeners.
But please do tweet at Will Brinson.
Yes, and let me know that I'm not an epidemiologist. But like, I think that it is perfectly fair and reasonable to have, and this is really more about school, I think, than necessarily playing sports. But like, I have concerns about putting my child in a classroom with hundreds of other, or, tens, 20, whatever it is, the number, like in the same building, breathing the same air with other kids who, again, that goes back to the society contract, but like, I don't know the long-term effects of this. No one does. It has not been around long enough to know them. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's something. I hope it's nothing. That would be great. But I also wouldn't feel comfortable going to a football stadium and sitting in the stands with thousands of strangers, going to standing in a beer line with hundreds of strangers, and going to the bathroom doing all that entails with going to the bathroom at a professional sporting event. None of that seems remotely feasible or possible or even comfortable for me at this point. Now, everybody has a different level of concern with this, and I understand that it varies from, whatever demographic, typically with age being the key factor there. But I just don't see how, with what's going on in different states, that they could even conceivably put fans in the stands at more than a 20% capacity max.
Right. And at some point, it doesn't even become worth it when you talk about the event staff and the money that you would have to, you're breaking even, but okay, you're taking care of the season ticket holders, but you're also assuming risk and all that. So here are two things I want to talk to you about, Will. The first is daily testing, and the second is a story I just published on CBSSports.com about competitive balance and competitive equity. But I want to talk about the daily testing because and we know that daily testing is going to happen for the first 2 weeks. And then once it goes below 5%, or once it remains below 5%, then it will be every other day. There is a point where you can test too much because it will start to be, it won't be effective. So take week 2 of the NFL season, all right? You played on Sunday. And for the listeners who don't know, you play on Sunday, Monday, whether you win or lost, it's a film day, it's a rest recovery day. Tuesday is the universal off day. Unless you play Thursday night football, Tuesday is your off day. And then you come back Wednesday, Thursday, Friday practice, Saturday walkthrough, Sunday game. Yep. So if you test every day, let's say you test on Wednesday. Well, okay, you don't know what folks did on Tuesday. Right. You test on Wednesday, but do you not practice on Wednesday? And now you come back on Thursday. And on Thursday, now you're able to practice, but only so many people were tested, or so many people were negative or positive, whatever. You're going to lose half of your practice days because you're waiting 24 hours for every test result. You can't do it. And so the only
Tuesday
days
has to become the test day.
No, Monday would be the test day because now Tuesday you're out. And so Wednesday, when you come back, everybody has the results. But that's the point.
But part of the problem, because Tuesday is your off day, you're asking everybody to not do anything on your off day because until like, you know,
that's right.
Like if you come back with it and you test negative, it's like, listen, man, you can't go to like a restaurant on Tuesday because you just tested negative, and we need you to stay negative until Sunday. If you test positive on Tuesday, just better not go to the restaurant because you got coronavirus. So
that's right.
It's
so there's the issue there. And so then JC Tretter, the Browns center and NFLPA president, on the conference call last week brought up, hey, listen, I'm the center. I touch the ball, got two dudes on either side of me. Quarterback handles the ball, blah, 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 right? If I test positive, and I test positive on Friday, so you've done everything right, but whatever happened, this kid came back from school with it, right? To Will's earlier point. And so on Friday, on the last day, and so now I test positive on Saturday, and anybody who had contact with me, or maybe 15 guys aren't able to play. There becomes a competitive balance issue with this, where the entire NFL and really every sort of sport and game that we know is all built on competitive equity and balance, that I have as good a chance to win this game as you do.
Sure.
With everything being equal.
When Roger Goodell says the integrity of the game and competitive, this is what he is speaking about. That, and fans are another issue. We'll talk about that in a second. But you're right. I mean, like, if you lose your entire offensive line on Friday because of coronavirus, the competitive balance of that matchup has been thrown dramatically, and that's without even diving into the gambling aspect of it. Which,
but here's the thing: you would probably, depending on how many guys you lost and how many positions, you would have to forfeit the game, or the game would be canceled. So is the game going to be forfeited and you lose, or is the game canceled? Now, let's just say that one game out of 256 games, one game is canceled. Let's say it's the Week 10 game between the Seahawks and the Los Angeles Rams. This is division game. Whoever got it, whatever. It doesn't matter. But that game is canceled. And so at the end of the season, what you have is a 12-4 San Francisco 49ers team. And then you have an 11-4 Seattle Seahawks team. And you have a 10-5 Rams team. How do you figure out who won the division? Because let's say the Seahawks beat the 49ers twice. If they played the Rams and won, they'd been 12-4 as well. They would have won the division. You can't do winning percentages. They own the head-to-head, but they played one fewer game. Once one domino falls, everything else starts to fall. We could talk about the number one seed in the playoffs. That could be the difference between a first-round bye and home game throughout the playoffs and being the number 5, the wild card.
Well,
and so once those dominoes fall, how do you stop it?
But that doesn't even take into account the fact that, like, if let's say you lose enough dudes on a Friday to have to forfeit the game, well, you're not playing the next week.
No, probably not.
You know,
I'm taking best case scenario. There's just one game that's canceled.
I almost think in this case, the NFL, I wonder if they thought about this at all. I mean, you would think they have, but like, so they have that trapdoor built into the schedule in the first 2 months of the season where they could hack out like 3 or 4 weeks, I think it is, take it out, bump back week 1 to October 1st, and just run the season as normal. I almost think they need to push the Super Bowl back. This is kind of a crazy idea, but push the Super Bowl back a month, or push the playoffs back a month, tentatively. Okay. And because, I mean, like, you're not fighting for stadium room, by the way, like scheduling stadium room. There's no.
You're not in Tampa. You are not. They are very well equipped to have the
I just
Super
mean,
Bowl
I mean, like
10th.
In general, like there's not like a. There's not like a.
You'll move the Bon Jovi concert in order to play a home postseason.
But there's not a Bon Jovi concert. That's my point.
That's right.
Right. There's nothing to fight with because there's no outdoor events. But at least right now. So my point is, like, you bump the playoffs back a tentative month, and this is kind of an insane moving schedule. But you almost need to have like a couple like empty weeks at the end of the year to fill in the event that some of these games are canceled, or like you have because you can't have one team play or two teams play 14 games and one team play. To your point, you just can't do it. And if you lose enough guys that you have to forfeit, or the game has to be canceled because both teams have it or whatever, I mean, the logistics of this are insane.
That's right. That's right. And so I had spoken to one source who told me this is something that had been discussed in league circles in early June, but that it just kind of went off to the wayside because there were more pressing matters. And of course there were at the time, and there still are, frankly, including the opt-out clause. And then, of course, they still want to figure out the 2021 salary cap. A lot of people are talking about the economics and how they're getting close to that, and how that this will probably be figured out for the start of training camp. I'm not entirely sure about that, because this is a lot of money that's being discussed. And there's no reason that they have to figure it out right now. They can just play the season and figure it out later. But I do think that they're going to have to address this potential issue with competitive balance and equity, because it is literally the foundation of this entire league. It is the reason that a team in Green Bay, Wisconsin can compete with the New York Giants year in, year out.
How much of a concern do you think competitive? To me, it's not it's probably like a 3 out of 10, but I know some people were a lot more worried about it. Brandon Tierney, our colleague, has been harping on it. But the idea that, like, I mean, Florida didn't give a crap about anything. They'll do it. Like, they're like, hey, you want to have 50,000 people in the stadium? Let's go. I mean, like, they might be 100% attendance or 70% attendance, whereas we know the Patriots will max out at 20% attendance for the entire season. From a competitive balance standpoint, where does that rank for you?
It ranks at like a 1.
Yeah.
Because here's the other thing. Denver is the only team that plays in the altitude that they play in.
That's
Seattle year in and year out travels more miles than every other team. There are certain elements to this game that are unfair on its face that we have also agreed to and said, okay, I get it. Chicago Bears, they can only fit 55,000 people in their stadium. Meanwhile, standing room only at a Cowboys game's 90,000 people. We never talk about, wow, it's louder and blah, blah, blah. There's 40,000 more people. And so because of that, yeah, it's going to stink. But does that ultimately shift what happens on the field so much that we then dispute the end result? I don't think so.
And I think home field advantage has been for the past couple of years has sort of been like it's not as, and RJ White's pointed this out, it's not as impactful as it used to be in older days. But I do think it matters. So, like, if you're betting on the Chiefs and Texans game and you want to bet maybe you think, all right, I think the Texans can hang. I know the Chiefs are 10-point favorites and they're going to blow them out, but the Chiefs are not going to have a full crowd at Arrowhead Stadium.
And so you have to decide how much of their home field advantage, if it's 2.3 points for every home game, how much do the fans equate into that? And because we don't have any sort of sample size to draw from, it is a complete guess. There's no, 7 years ago, they did this. I know Patrick Mahomes was in high school. However, they did this in front of no fans. There's no way that you can figure that out.
Yeah. Okay. So, oh, man. Yeah, with the preseason thing, what do you think they're going to try and do about like fringe roster guys, undrafted free agents who make their hay? I mean, are they just screwed?
I don't think so, just because, again, this coronavirus thing is very real, again, and guys are going to get it. And once they get it, they're going to be out for at least a week. And I think each team is going to be very wise to just have their list ready of, all right, you've been in our system, you know what's good, come on over. Will other teams try to poach that player and try to pay him a little bit more than the league minimum? Of course, but I think more than anything, this is where your pro and college scouts, and the college scouts also have no clue what they're doing. I texted with a number of college scouts yesterday as I got back to work, and they have no direction from, one, the league, because they're no travel allowed. And then number two, where are you going to go? What college is going to let you come in there? And every college has a different set of rules and blah, blah, blah. And if you've paid any attention, you all understand this.
Well,
and so
who lives in North Carolina, you literally can't go to New York unless you quarantine for 2 weeks. So what do you like?
That's right.
You're not going to run up to Syracuse and shit. It's not going to work.
Yeah. The days of the 220 night a year in a hotel scout, that ain't happening this year.
No, it's really not. I don't. How many games do you, all right, let's say hypothetically you're a beat reporter for the Charlotte Observer covering the Carolina Panthers. How many games would you anticipate being at the stadium for in 2020 right now?
Well, here's what I keep saying, Will. I am 100% sure the season is going to start.
Yeah.
I am 95% sure that week 1 is going to happen on time. That the Texans and Chiefs are going to play on that Thursday night. What is it, September 10th?
Yeah.
That it's going to happen. I After that, once it starts getting colder, once we get into flu season, no clue.
All bets are off for the whole country on everything.
On everything. Look where we were 2 months ago compared to now. And so we would be arrogant to even assume that we can anticipate what this is going to look like in October. And so I'm not going to make an attempt. However, I do think that there is enough momentum. I do think there are enough safety protocols in place. I hope that things aren't so bad, and that this may also be a little optimistic of me or pessimistic, depending on which way you look at it, that by September 10th, maybe things are still bad like they are now, but we can still kick off. But I don't know.
I would set the over-under for a Panthers beat writer attended games total at 9.5. I think they'll go to every home game. A lot of virtual for travel. Yeah, exactly. I think they'll do. I'm banking on 8 home games. Maybe Atlanta. Maybe you drive to Atlanta. Exactly.
Right.
I don't know if you. I mean, I can't see Joe Person huffing it down in his car to New Orleans.
He would do it because he is as dogged a beat writer as there is.
No, I'm not. Yeah, you know.
I know. Joe's my homie, and so I got to throw that in there.
Yeah, he's my guy. I'm just thinking, like, I think most of these media, and look, this is a pretty convenient spot for. I mean, media organizations are hemorrhaging cash too. Yeah. So it's sort of like, hey, look, you know, we could save a ton in travel here by having guys just watch the games from home, because there's not going to be a ton of locker room access.
There's not going to be any locker room
right,
access.
Exactly.
It's all going to be virtual. So, yeah,
right,
I mean, you're going to look for an edge in some way. You still want to show up to practice. So I was texting with one NFC team earlier today who said that there are going to be 10 media members per day at their training camp practices. There's going to be a pool videographer and a pool photographer. That is included in the 10. Now there are 8 other spots. And when you think about any sort of market of any size, really outside of Jacksonville, sometimes Charlotte, when there's no Cam Newton, and oh, what do you know? There's no Cam Newton.
Yeah.
I mean, in a training camp practice, there could be 4 times, 5 times as many people, just, you know, non-videographers and non-photographers. So it's going to be a real dog-eat-dog rat race there to figure out who those 8 are going to be day in and day out.
Well, and, you know, there are situations like, you know, and I guess maybe it feels a little easier league-wide. There's not a pressing, insane situation. But listen, I mean, somewhere like Pittsburgh, where you have the Athletic that sends multiple people, the Post-Gazette sends multiple people. There's a, you know, like I think Jim Wexell does like the 24/7 site.
Yeah.
You know, you have independent sites that are created, or Boston, a great example, right? I mean, like,
absolutely.
Boston Globe has multiple beat writers and columnists who want to go to practice. They have like Tom Currens at CSN New England. You know, they have like Mike Girardi, who's local there and works for the NFL Network. You have
our own Tyler Sullivan.
Right. CBS Sports' Tyler Sullivan. You have Greg Bedard, who has the Boston Sport. Like, there are a ton of organizations. So you sort of have to figure out, is this going to be like, do you give the Boston Globe, you know, every
day, every other day? Is it a coin flip? Is this a lottery? All of those things.
Like, what days are Belichick? What days is Belichick talking? What day is Tom Brady? You know, how do you
Cam
sort of? Yeah. What day is Cam Newton? Right. Did I say Brady? Jeez.
Yeah.
It's been long. Yeah. I mean, if you even said Cam Newton 5 minutes ago. But the point is, like, there is a lot to parse out, and maybe that's too inside baseball. I don't know, but man, I
think fans will, because it's funny, when I was a beat writer covering the Carolina Panthers, the month that I got the most followers every year in and year out, it was the last week of July to the last week of August. It was training camp. It was training camp updates. I'd get flooded, thousands of followers, and then I wouldn't get a follower again until the next training camp, or so it seemed. And that was back when I cared. But that's the point, is that, like, most writers sort of make their hay in terms of training camp. And if you don't have access, or you have access every other day, it's going to be difficult. And I'll only say this, and I'll hop off the soapbox right now, but I do hope that once everything does get back to normal, that the media rights are restored. And I know that listeners don't necessarily think that they care about it. They certainly should care about it, that insights that they like to listen to from podcasts like this, from CBS Sports HQ, et cetera, a lot of that is based off our interactions in the locker rooms with these guys. And, you know, once you sort of lose those rights, it's really difficult to get them installed back. So I'm very hopeful.
You're going to have teams who are like, whoa, we like this.
Yeah.
You're telling me I can do a Zoom call with these mofos instead of popping up here and saying on to Cincinnati 42 times? Like, I mean, like, you will lose a lot of information coming from teams without open locker rooms because
Yep.
they're guys who have covered the teams for so long that they know who to talk to. They know, and those guys were willing to talk to them. You're right. That would be a tricky situation. You know, I think about like our friend Jordan Rodriguez, who was on the podcast talking Rams. She's never met anybody.
Yep.
You know, she's on a new beat and she's doing it via Zoom, and you can establish stuff that way. But it's, you know, it's one thing if you're, you know, like Joe has been in Charlotte for a long time. He knows everybody. He's not going to not be able to develop relationships because he's just been there.
Well, it's also difficult. They have a brand new coaching staff. It's a brand new quarterback. So it's not the same.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, there's no more Greg Olsons or Cams or Mike Filberts or Josh Normans. I mean, everybody that was on outside of the long snapper and Shaq Thompson, there's nobody from the 15-1 Carolina Panthers.
That's a great point. Yeah, and that turnover happens constantly in the NFL. So we'll see how that plays out. But I agree with you. That needs to happen. All right, I think the only other thing, you mentioned the salary cap, just to circle back to that. One more aspect of the finances that I'm curious about, and this is what we sort of referenced off the top. The players, these NFL players Mike Florio had a piece where he's like, the players are worried, even the guys with fully guaranteed years are worried that the season is going to get chopped down and the NFL is going to attempt to not pay out the full schedule. How do you think that will play out?
So the NFL owners, absolutely, in their infinite wisdom, all the CBAs they've negotiated before, they look like absolute fools not having a force majeure.
How do you not have that?
I mean, it's incredible. And when I was talking with sources, a lot of sources on the
play. Old enough to see the 1918 Spanish flu. You got to know this is coming.
And so I was talking with folks on the player side of things who wanted to keep that quiet because they didn't want to brag about it during negotiations. And I'm talking about the union side. They were like, yeah, we won that one. Everybody said we lost the CBA, but what do you say now?
Pandemic justification, baby. Suck it.
Right? Because and it's true. If that CBA did not get ratified, can you imagine what we'd be? There would not be a CBA right now. Now, they'd play the season. It'd be an uncapped year or whatever. But my goodness, what February and March would look like. And so at least they have labor peace for the next 10, 11 years. Now, the salary cap, there's one idea that, you know, you borrow from future years and you smooth it out. The thing is that the salary cap's at $198.2 million. Everyone benefits from the salary cap staying the same in 2021.
Yes.
And, you know, and certainly not taking a dip because team owners and their coaches and general managers have built their teams in their own visions. And if you say, well, salary cap's 150 now due to the formula, I can't lose $40 million in cap space and roster space. And the players obviously don't want that to happen to them either, because goodbye to the $5 million a year linebacker. We're either taking a rookie or you're Bobby Wagner. And that's it.
And just fans don't want this either. Because trickle-down effect will be much worse football if there is much less money to spend on players.
And so now the issue is, well, somebody has to fill the hit. And I'm hearing from some of our media brethren outside of CBS who are like, well, you know, the players need to burden some of this, need to carry some of this, shoulder this. No, they don't. No. Because first of all, they voted on a collectively bargained agreement. That's number one. Number two, you signed the contract and everybody understands what the terms of those contracts are. Okay. And then finally, number three, I understand that these NFL team owners got into ownership either because they inherited it or they wanted to own an NFL team. And either way, it's a gigantic money-making experience. But if anybody has a 401k and saw what happened to the stock market and to your 401k over the last couple of months, you understand that sometimes sure things aren't sure things. And we all understand that sometimes assets do not perform. And just because you've been making money hand over fist every single year, even if your team goes 4-12 every single year, that doesn't mean that during a pandemic, you still get to make money hand over fist. And so that's the point of owning the team. You get to be in that club of 32 men and women, but then you also get to enjoy the tens and hundreds of millions of dollars every year. But in a pandemic, you don't get it. Right. But the guys who are out there on the field who are making sure that you don't hemorrhage money, yeah, they should still get their money.
Well, and you know, part of the problem is a lot of these guys who signed, as an example, there's a player. Let's say a player takes much more in fully guaranteed money down the stretch in base salary versus taking a big signing bonus to help out the team, which happens all the time, right?
That's right.
To help make the salary cap easier. And so they don't have this because the signing bonus is prorated over the course of the contract, and it makes it harder to cut them, and it makes it a pain in the ass for the salary cap, yada, yada, yada. So these teams have asked, these players are taking that. Well, like all of a sudden, like Russell Wilson's going to get 3/4 of his money that he was guaranteed for this year because of a pandemic, even though they don't have force majeure. And force majeure, if you don't know, is act of God, which means, pandemic pops up, whether it was actually an act of God.
And we don't have to pay you.
Right. Exactly. It's dicey. Like, let's say there's 12 games. What happens in a 12-game season? And the other thing too is that the NFL is in this weird spot because let's say Russell Wilson, or let's say, better example, Yannick Ngakoue decides that he is concerned about his family's health and well-being, and he does not want to come to training camp because of the coronavirus. Now, most of us are not going to believe that that's why he's staying away. He's staying away because he got franchise tagged. He doesn't want to play for the Jaguars. However, he states that publicly. Are the Jaguars then going to fine him? Because they can under the CBA. And so and that's an extreme example. But if somebody doesn't feel comfortable coming into camp, is the team in the league going to enforce this in the CBA in the middle of a pandemic? That's tough.
These all have to be good faith negotiations.
Right.
And so to your earlier point about if there are 12 games, do you pay that player all 16 games? Well, you are contractually obligated to. However, if that player, because then if NFL team owners then get that leg up, you now have ceded some high ground. If you were the NFL Players Association, where you say, well, it was in the contract, you got to pay us for all 16, even though we didn't deliver. And so now you paid out that money for games. And now the NFL owners also had to give that money back to broadcast networks because they didn't give the games that they had promised.
Sure.
And so now what you are faced with is an Armageddon situation in 2021 with the salary cap, where the owners now have a leg to stand on saying, we paid you for games that you didn't participate in. We had to pay for games that we couldn't deliver. Now you still want the salary cap at $198.2 million. And so now that puts the players in a much tougher situation where I think a lot of fans would be like, yeah, guys, you got paid to not work. What you doing here?
Yeah, if players get paid for 16 games in a 12-game season, just as a hypothetical, they will have. I mean, fans already want to side with the owners anyway. That's just how.
For whatever reason, they do.
Well, the NFL has made football it's like the post office. It's like considered like a utility. It's like it's just the local team. It's actually a private enterprise. Anyway, the fans will 100% side with the owners if the players play 12 games to get paid for 16. But then it's like, what do you do with or who are you cutting when that salary cap gets to a weird spot?
Right. So it has to be good faith.
Yeah.
It has to be that societal contract. We all have to say, we are in this together. We're tied at the hip. Yeah, you're always trying to get one over on me. I'm trying to get one over on you. But if we work together, we will build generational wealth forever and ever.
Do you think that what the owners did, because this is what people are asking, is like, where's the other shoe? Do you think what the owners did with the preseason, all that stuff was partially good faith? Like, all right, let's just get this done. Or do you think they're like, all right, we're looking for some kind of angle here?
Some of that, but again, ultimately, because there are literal billions of dollars at stake, I think the owners understood, guys, let's just get to week one. And whether they were looking to, hey, we gave you that olive branch, so now what about us? Maybe. And can they play that card? Sure. But then also the players can look at them kind of like that meme, like, now you know that you weren't gonna get any preseason games anyway.
Right. Yeah. It's like, really, let's not play this up as like we're noble men of honor who are canceling the preseason. It wasn't ever happening.
That's right.
All right. Jonathan Jones at J Jones 9. J Jones 9 or J Jones 09?
J Jones 9.
J Jones 9. Glad to have you back from vacation. Going to talk with you. Check out what's the article up on the site right now is.
Yeah, on competitive balance and what happens when the competitive balance is thrown out of whack.
Good stuff as always, buddy. The link is in the bio. The link is in the description of the podcast. So there you go. Debo all over it as always. Talk to you soon, pal.